Innalillahi ya Allah. Ini nggak disunggas, ini kita maju ya.
Azazil is a pretty powerful demon of lore. He's the father of possession, and in certain texts is said to be the first demon to ever perfect the power. He started as an angel, alongside Lucifer, depicted as a handsome, statuesque hunk of a man with a pair of feathery wings. But when Lucifer and his cronies fell down to hell and Azazil with, he was corrupted by the legions of hell, and is depicted in Christian and Jewish texts as a demonic, hideous figure. Back while he still bunked in heaven, Azazil had a bit of a rebellious streak. When God created man, Azazil was not particularly impressed by this work, instead stating, "Why should God create a human being who will shed blood and confusion while the angels prostrate before him and sing his glory day and night?" And I hate to say it, but he is a little bit right. Humans shedding blood and confusion is undoubtedly one of our biggest design flaws. I get where he's coming from on that point entirely. He never sheds any blood. So obviously, since Azazil was kind of calling out the boss directly on his creation, he was cast out of the kingdom of heaven down to earth alongside several other angels. This didn't really humble him though, it just made him a lot angrier, as then Azazil raised an army of fallen angels who bred with the humans to produce monstrous beings called the Nephilim, twisted giants. He spread evil and corruption throughout the land, teaching man the art of weapon making, and apparently, if legends are to be believed, he also taught women how to deceive by making cosmetics. So if you want to blame someone for the high prices at Sephora, it's Azazil apparently. Azazil the fallen angel. Azazil is very prominent in Jewish texts primarily, where he was considered a very serious force of evil. Early Semitic tribes have been said to make sacrifices to Azazil when they made sacrifices to Yahweh at the same time. To make a sacrifice to Azazil, they would drive a goat into the desert or push it into a deep ravine. Now this wasn't actually supposed to honor him or appeal him, rather it symbolized people sending their sins back to the original sort, and this goat was sort of a scapegoat for that sort of thing, and that's where we get the term. There you go, you learned something today. And if you'd like to learn way more things, or if you just want to be entertained, Top 5 Scary is the place to be, my friends. We've got videos on demons, ghosts, goblins, aliens, cryptids, and anything scary you can name. Stay subscribed and stay scared. Alright, let's keep on going. Number 4, the Duan. When I make these videos, I try to get as global as I can with it. I don't want all the demons coming from one place. I believe demons obey no borders, and I think demons should belong to all of us, all over the planet. Diversity is a demon's greatest strength, after all. With that in mind, I realized I don't do a lot of Euro demons. So here's the Duan, a terrifying creature of Irish folklore. And I gotta say, this guy is awesome. He's kind of like a demon ghost rider. I'd get an action figure of this dude in like a heartbeat. The Duan is a headless horseman, an undead pale rider atop a black horse. He is said to be the embodiment of the spirit of the Celtic god Cruim Duv. The Duan carries his own severed head in one hand, which is so metal. It's got its mouth split open and putrid rotten skin, and in the other a whip made of a human spine that he uses to whip his spectral horsey. Everything about this guy would make like the sickest forearm tattoo ever. It's said that wherever the Duan stops, death will soon follow in its wake. He rides through town and villages after dark, where the townspeople will hide away, lest they meet his perilous gaze. He blinds anyone who looks at him, and I get it. Hey, some days I don't want to be perceived at all either. Totally get where you're coming from here. Unfortunately, I have a job where I'm on camera. He has the ability to speak only once per journey of his, and he chooses his words incredibly carefully, so he'll never stop through the drive-thru no matter how much you bug him to and scream in the back seat. When it calls out a person's name, whoever's name it spoke will perish instantly. There's really not any room for interpretation or discussion here. The Duan rides up, says your name from his spooky little severed head, and that's kind of it for you. You're done. You're done in like a doornail. Sorry. Number 3, Lamashtu. Coming up next on this list is going to be Lamashtu. Lamashtu? I don't know. I've never heard it said. I've only read it. Lamashtu is an ancient demon of Sumerian and Mesopotamian lore, manifesting as a horrid hybrid of a hairy animalistic body, a lioness's head, donkey's teeth specifically, and razor-sharp talons. There is a lot going on there. I understand if you need a minute to try and piece all that together in your head to visualize this creature, but I'm sure we've got a beautiful photo for us right behind me. If that lovely description of her physical traits wasn't enough to convince you of just how disgusting Lamashtu is, let me describe some of her habits and hobbies. She's renowned for her hellish torment, and she just loves to harass pregnant women. This is a demon that cannot get enough of bothering pregnant women. Hopefully so she can steal their babies and then eat their bones and drink their blood. That's gotta be like some of the most evil things you can possibly do. So I feel like that's definitely qualifications enough to earn this baddie on the list of the top 5 demonic creatures scarier than the devil. Now, she's known to wipe out crops, contaminate water, she spreads plague, pestilence, famine, death, and I'm sure if she could, she would spread war too, just to round out all the horsemen. It's said too that she is also capable of possession, and once she's inside you, you'll experience terrifying nightmares every single night and come down with a grave illness. Okay, so that explains why I haven't been sleeping nearly as well lately since I started reading about scary demons all the time. So what do you do if you've got a nasty donkey-toothed demoness trying to make booster juice out of your offspring? Well, ancient Sumerian and Mesopotamian people would invoke the spirit of Pazuzu, another demonic creature who is said to be a god of the wind. Pazuzu himself is a demon, and one that causes chaos and pain, and hey, look, don't get Pazuzu wrong. He will absolutely spread a little bit of famine, plague, and pestilence through the lands and torment the villagers, but he's got a bit of a soft spot for protecting pregnant women and women in general. He's a noble demon like that. Pazuzu's got some demon honor, where he goes after demons and hunts them down who are naughtier than he is. You know how in the Godzilla movies, the only way to stop Mothra or Rodan or Ghidorah is to have Godzilla wrestle him for a bit? This is kind of like the demon equivalent of that. Coming up at the number 2 spot is the Oni. An Oni is a yokai from Japanese folklore, a brutal, overwhelmingly strong beast, resembling closely to an orc or ogre or troll in Western fantasy. Nothing like Shrek though, nothing at all like Shrek. Oni are pure, brutal, hulking monsters of hatred. They're known for their fierce and evil nature, their absolute sadistic love of violence, bloodshed, and oh yeah, eating human flesh. However, traditionally in ancient Japanese texts, Oni are thought to be more complex beings than simply being all the way evil, with most stories actually featuring Oni portraying them in a more nuanced light than most demons. That's good. That's good that the Onis have a lot going on. According to Japanese Buddhism, an Oni is one step of the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. When a particularly sinister or evil person dies, it's said that they'll be reborn as an Oni. In some of the old tales, if a person is just spectacularly beyond sinister evil, they'll become an Oni even before their death. That seems kind of wrong. If you're super evil, you get to turn into an even angrier, cool demon, you'll just love that. That's not a punishment. They're almost always depicted as hulking, muscular monsters with red or blue skin, jagged teeth, and one or more horns growing out of their heads, sometimes with more eyes than normal. Frequently, they're shown to wear tiger pelt clothes, and they carry a giant weapon called a kanabo, which literally translates to metal stick. It was a really mean historical weapon, and it was a lot more like a slab of iron than it was a weapon. Just seeing an Oni is said to render heart-stopping fear in a man, due in no small part to their raging appearance. They bring calamity with them wherever they go, war, plague, earthquakes, the usual fun stuff, able to harness lightning and thunder, and they have an insatiable lust for human flesh, and are said to be able to suck a person back in a single bite. I kinda wanna see that. And finally, at number 1, Akaname. At the number 1 spot is the Akaname, the single funniest demon I have ever read about in all of my years reading about folklore here in the fog. The Akaname is a Japanese yokai, and its name literally translates to scum sucker or filth licker. We're off to an amazing start here with this little guy. An Akaname is a small ghoul or gremlin-like creature which tends to hang out around dirty little bathhouses or prowls around bathrooms. They're pretty small, about the size of a toilet. They have a mop of greasy, slimy black hair on top of their heads. They're naked and are said to be just as slimy and greasy like their hair. They've got dark green skin that makes them look all moldy, or they have these muddy pink bodies that makes them look rotten and infected. Is it coming across to you that these things are just disgusting? That a creature called the filth licker and looks like mold on 2 feet is a vile little monstrosity. They've got these extremely long prehensile tongues that they use to eat their favorite snack, and I've been waiting for this, bathroom grime. They lap up all the slime, grease, hair, filth, and don't make me say it, don't make me say it, things that can be found around a bathroom. I was gagging multiple times reading about this demon, and I thought if I have to, you have to all know about it as well. If I'm cursed with this knowledge, I have to pass it on. This is the most foul creature ever put to paper. They detest a clean space and will never be around Lemon Pledge. They only appear to homes that show a complete lack of sanitary discipline, and we're told as a legend to get people to, clean the bathroom every now and again, lest they have to deal with this little toilet pest. If you've got roommates who are like a big problem, not washing the toilet seat, just tell them all about the Akaname and how he's gonna get inside your house. It's thought that the Pokemon Lickitung, adorable, funny old Lickitung, was inspired by an Akaname. So if you're a big Pokemon fan, good luck ever looking at a Lickitung the same way again, knowing what it probably eats. I'm gonna be honest. Is this like the most blood-curdlingly scary demon ever? Well, it doesn't slice and dice or whip a spectral horse with a severed spine or something, but it's a goblin that eats hair off bathroom floors. That's the scariest thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. Number 5. Draugr. First up on our list is going to be the Norwegian undead creature, the Draugr. If you're a fan of RPGs like Skyrim or God of War, no doubt you are already very familiar with the Draugr, because you've likely encountered roughly 30,000 of them in one of Skyrim's many crypts. Now, the ones that populate Bleak Falls Barrow aren't exactly impressive, so let's learn about the real-life inspiration. Well, as real as a mythical creature can be. A Draugr, sometimes also called a Dragon, is the ghost of a warrior who has stayed on Midgard. Draugr live in their graves, often guarding some treasure they'd collected in their worldly days at their burial mound. This is why, in Skyrim, you find them in the hundreds in tombs. That makes the most sense where you'd find a bunch of zombies, right? Ancient folklore suggested that if a man was to be lain to rest without actually being lain down, so if, a body was left slump over or sitting, kneeling, what have you, any of the many ways that warriors land after they've passed, then the soul wouldn't be able to rest, and their body would be reanimated as a Draugr, doomed to protect their gold for the rest of their days in this mortal coil. It's said that those with dark spirits become Draugr, those with hearts of greed, hate, or with unfinished dealing. Now, in life, a Draugr was a mighty Viking warrior, and in death, they keep that immense strength. Draugr are said to be supernaturally strong, although they give off an appearance of weakness, They look necrotic, rotten, and generally foul, and are described as being pretty difficult to put down permanently. Some folklore even saying that they are resistant to most human weaponry. Now, an interesting bit of Draugr trivia that some stories describe is them having the ability to walk through people's dreams, where they'll leave behind a gift so that the living person may be assured of the nature of their visit. A Draugr can curse someone in their dreams and mark them as a target, bringing disease, pestilence, and misfortune to their victim through the daylight, and then at night they can seek them out and strike. Now, the best way to stop a Draugr is before they even rise altogether. In some cultures, the dead were buried with their toes tied together, or needles driven through the soles of their feet in order to prevent them from walking. The dead were carried feet first into their mausoleums, then bricked up behind a giant door. It was thought that the dead would only be able to leave the way they had came, and if they were carried feet first, they wouldn't see where they were going. And if you want to see more videos about cryptids, monsters, mythical creatures, real scares, well, we've got all of that and then some on Top 5 Scary. Click through, subscribe, and stay scared all night long. Number 4. Rugaru. A Rugaru is a creature of French folklore, and it's sort of like a more Cajun answer to the werewolf. The name stems from the French word for werewolf, loup-garou, that over the years has shifted into Rugaru as one word when being told and retold to generations in Louisiana and across New Orleans, and some parts of French Canada too. We get a Quebecois werewolf. I didn't know about that, and that was very exciting for me. This creature, for the most part, is very similar to a werewolf. It's a giant man-wolf hybrid. The key difference between a werewolf and the Rugaru, though, is agency. While a werewolf traditionally is depicted as being powerless and at odds with their curse, often transforming, at the worst possible time. It's always right before a big date or dance or something. A Rugaru has way more control. It keeps its human intelligence, its consciousness, and its faculties about it, even while it's changing into a monstrous wolf form, presenting the most dangerous elements of man and wolf. Throughout the 16th century, it was thought that the monstrous Rugaru was responsible for just about everything that could go wrong in a village. Missing livestock, robberies, people missing, all the work of troublesome French werewolves. So, like I said, it resembles one pretty closely. Ferocious claws, giant teeth, bipedal wolf man, although it can conceal itself as just a regular looking human, so you never know who you can trust. Just keep an eye out for anybody munching on dog treats at lunch. In Cajun legends, the creature is said to dwell in the swamps and the backwoods. There are several variants and local legends for where the Rugaru stems from. Sometimes, the legend states that it was someone who was cursed, either by voodoo or witches, and cursed to have a lust for human blood. Another really interesting variation version I found of a Rugaru's origins is that they are born out of those who break the rules of Lent, coinciding with old legends being told to get Cajun children to behave. If you make a promise to give something up for Lent and you break your promise, it's said a Rugaru will sneak into your house while you sleep and drag you by the toes into the murky swamps, never to be seen again. The workaround? Just don't make any promises for anything, ever. Don't ever try to improve yourself. Number 3. Night Marchers. Much like their Norwegian cousins the Dger, the Night Marchers are a mythical legion of ghostly warriors who refuse to break formation, even in death. The Night Marchers come to us from Hawaiian folklore and are the ghosts of ancient Hawaiian warriors who serve as the royal vanguard for a sacred king. They rise on nights that honor their ancient gods, and they're said to come forth from their burial sites, or even to rise up from the ocean, returning to the world of the living once more. The Night Marchers rise but leave their bodies behind still entombed in the dirt, and are spectral warriors unlike the Dger. They don't have physical forms anymore. Kinda cooler, to be honest. They appear as they did in life though, dressed for battle, carrying their spears, clubs, beating their drums, blowing conch shells, letting just about everybody know that they are back and their advancing march is coming towards you. Now, despite being named the Night Marchers, they don't actually march. Their feet don't touch the water or ground as they sort of float through the night, and unless you saw them with your own eyes, you wouldn't know they'd ever existed. They don't leave any traces of anything. I mean, I guess that makes sense when you don't have footprints. Now, on nights that honor them, they march through the darkness as soon as the sun sets and spend the rest of the night marching ever forward. It's said on these nights you can hear their chanting, their marching, and you can become very aware of the foul, death-like odor that follow them. Now, it's said that if you do hear the telltale sounds of the night march approaching, the absolute last thing you want to do is be as foolish as to try and go steal a glance. I know it sounds tempting, a legion of ghostly warriors, but ancient folklore says that any mortal looking upon the night marchers will meet a swift and violent end. They can't be stopped by anything physical, so no walls or cells are going to do you any good. It's said that the only way to survive an encounter with the night marchers is to show them proper respect, to lay face down, motionless, and you'll be spared. Another way is if you can recognize your ancestor among the march, you can call out to them. But that doesn't really work for anybody. That only works if you have an ancestor who's already in there. Generally, I would do my level of best to try and avoid meeting the gaze of the Night Marchers, just, in general. Number 2. Ushi Oni. Coming up next on the list is going to be a demon from the land of the rising sun, the Ushi Oni. An Ushi Oni is a demon taking the form of an ox, and its name literally translates to ox demon. I love when they're literal like that. The Ushi Oni is depicted many different ways, but one trait that's common across all versions and depictions of the creature is that it's bearing the head of an ox with a body of something wretched that it should not have. Sometimes it's got a horrible spider body and it's got all these long elongated legs. Sometimes it's got a scary mammalian predator body like a cat. Sometimes it's even got the body of a human, but the head of an ox, like a Japanese answer to a minotaur. Case in point, always has an ox head. Something scary down below. Consistent across all mythologies of the Ushi Oni though is that they are absolutely remorseless, brutal demons who love to inflict pain and love to hurt humans. Not really my scene, but to each their own. They're exceedingly cruel. They love to ravage towns, attack lone villagers, spread plague and pestilence wherever they go, and the Ushi Oni have even been known to take the last piece of pizza out of the box and they still leave the box in the fridge and don't tell anybody else. Absolute terrible creatures. Their favorite prey, you could probably guess, is humans, which they guzzle down as a little snack whenever they can find one. Their breath is noxious and is said to be toxic to people, so best of luck even dueling one of these things. Not only is it a powerhouse with awful teeth, but they vomit poisonous gas, so I'm gonna be honest, your odds, they're just not looking good. The only comfort is that, well, first of all, they're mythical, and they're only said to live along the mountains, rocky coasts, and beaches of western Japan, so as long as you're avoiding those areas, you and the Ushi Oni shouldn't be crossing paths. And finally, number 1. Mangal. Closing off our list of horrifying mythical creatures that would give Lucifer a clutch for his pitchfork is going to be the demon vampire spirit of the Philippines, the Mangal. And let me know down below in the comments if I'm pronouncing that right. My Tagalog needs a bit of work. Not settling for just being terrifying enough as a blood-sucking spirit of the night, the Mangal takes the myth of a vampire and cranks it up to 11. It sounds way more like something out of one of the new Doom games than it does folklore. The Mangal is a humanoid creature, and it's a scary, hideous, monstrous thing with giant leathery bat wings, which lets it fly through the night, swooping down and stealing prey before anyone can do anything about it. We haven't even started talking about the Manangal's namesake and its best gimmick. The name comes from the Tagalog word tangle, again let me know if I'm pronouncing that right, which means to remove or to separate, with its name translating kind of literally to one who separates itself. The reason for this is because the Manangal can split its top half from its bottom half, taking to the skies as a disembodied torso with horrid black wings flapping around, causing all kinds of terror. I can't imagine anything quite as horrifying as like just a torso with wings and like it's, I don't know, like guts and entrails free flowing flying around in there. I don't know if it seals itself off or if there's a ton of spill every time it does this. Much like traditional vampires, a Manangal is said to be thwarted by garlic. Sprinkling a little crushed garlic like Salt Bay style on top of a disembodied torso is enough to get rid of it, so keep a few cloves in your pockets. It's said it prefers to prey on sleeping targets, and I gotta say, no honor in doing that, and it seeks out newlyweds or couples in love. Very good news to me, which means I'm probably safe forever as a guy who eats a lot of garlic, doesn't sleep much, and keeps to myself sometimes. Number 5. Bunyip. Coming in at the number 5 spot is the Bunyip, which, from the name alone, you might be forgiven for thinking it sounds kinda cute. The Bunyip is a creature from Aboriginal Australian folklore. Its name literally means devil or evil spirit, translated from the Wemba Wemba language. The Bunyip is an aquatic predator, with many varying descriptions of it. Sometimes it sorta looks like a hippo, sometimes it looks like a cross between a giant cat and a giant dog, but with like tusks and fangs and all sorts of sharp bits, and sometimes it's just like a totally incomprehensible, long, snake-like, twisty being. The only real common across all depictions of the Bunyip is that it is a ferocious creature in its own right. Over the years, there have been a number of reported sightings or findings of mysterious bones in southern Australia that led early settlers and colonists to believe the Bunyip was a new creature out there waiting to be discovered. It inhabits swamps, rivers, and lakes, basically anywhere wet that it can hide itself and lurk for prey, dragging everything underwater. The first recorded sighting of it, or story about it, by Australian settlers was in 1851, when a tracing of the creature's body was discovered near a riverbank in Ararat, Victoria. Local Aboriginal hunters had speared an unknown beast after a member of their tribe had been felled, and made an imprint of the creature's body to remember it by. Described by one newspaper journalist as 11 paces long and 4 paces wide in extreme depth. This outline sadly no longer exists and is lost to time, but it was enough to spur an interest and a hunt for this possibly mythical, possibly real creature that's now become sort of a folk symbol for Australia. They love it down there. And hey folks, if you love hearing about cryptids, creepy crawlies, crypts, crooks, and everything that goes bump in the night, then you are already in the best spot on YouTube for that. Consider tossing a subscribe our way, and stick around for loads more scary content every day. Alright, let's keep on going. Number 4. Kosai. The Kosai is a creature that features prominently in Slavic folklore, sometimes known as the Immortal, or the Deathless. The Kosai is a shapeshifter capable of taking many forms, but it's always described as being hideously ugly, no matter the form. When it's a human, it prefers to ride naked on its horse through the mountains and manifests as a sort of wrinkly old man. But when it's looking for victims to sweep up, it can take the form of a giant whirlwind tornado to hoover up potential targets. Now my favorite thing about the Kosai is his craftiness. Although there are many tales that Kosai appears in, the most common feature of all of them is a spell which prevents him from dying, hence the names the Immortal, the Deathless. But the way he does this is really something else. He does this by literally hiding his soul away inside nesting objects to protect it. So, first he puts his soul inside a needle, then he hides that inside an egg, and then the egg is inside a duck, and the duck is inside a rabbit, and the rabbit's inside a chest, and the chest is chained up and buried on a far, far away island. So he's really got a backup plan if you're trying to get at his soul. It's gonna take more than one step. Another fairly common element of folklore present for the Kosai is his lecherous, womanizing ways, as he's often presented as an antagonist for a male suitor, with his most well-known legend being his rivalry with Prince Ivan Tsarevich, a Russian folk hero. In this legend, Ivan was a lonely prince who'd seen all 3 of his sisters married to 3 powerful wizards but was a bachelor himself. Honestly, if all my family members got married to wizards, I would be incredibly jealous and lonely, so I get where he was coming from. Eventually, he traveled the lands looking for a woman to make his queen and met a lovely warrior woman who soon left for war and left him behind, pleading not to open the door in their castle, which held an imprisoned man in chains. When Ivan freed him, he learned he'd been tricked by Kosai, who tried to steal his wife away from him. With a little help from Baba Yaga, his wizards-in-law, and a little bit of guile, Ivan was able to fell Kosai the Deathless. Whether or not it was actually permanent though, well, that's anyone's guess. He is deathless after all. Number 3, the Chimera. The Chimera is a creature of Greek myth and is basically something of a Frankenstein monster of all the worst parts of a bunch of angry creatures taped together. It's got the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and most scary of all, the butt of a dragon. But it's also depicted as having 3 extremely angry fire-breathing heads of a lion, goat, and a dragon. Sometimes it's even described as having a serpent in place of its tail, who is probably getting the worst deal out of all the creatures in that arrangement. The creature was thought to be of divine origin. Whether a product of the gods or something more sinister is unknown, but the Chimera was downright nasty. I mean, it's a 3-headed monster that breathes fire. There was no way that it was going to go around and be like a service to the community. Anyway, in the Greek myth of yore, the Chimera was slain by Bellerophon, the son of Poseidon and the master of the mighty Pegasus, the winged horse. He was exiled after slaying his brother, but sought redemption because it was a bit of a misunderstanding. So from there on out, Bellerophon gets sent all over town doing favors for local kings, befriending local winged horses that are drinking from fountains, you know, standard issue hero stuff, eventually making his way to an audience with King Iobates, who had the biggest challenge for him yet to defeat the Chimera in single combat. As frightening as the Chimera was, it was slain by Bellerophon, who drove a lead-tipped spear directly into its flaming gullet, which I guess it couldn't handle. Number 2, Cerberus. Another fabled creature of Greek myth. Coming up on the number 2 spot is Hell's most loyal watchdog and a very good boy. Cerberus serves as the guardian of the gates of the underworld and is an unbelievably big 3-headed dog. He's there to make sure that no one escapes the punishment they've been served, and if somehow someone was to try and escape the underworld, like say any would-be heroes of myth or any bratty sons of Hades, they'd have to deal with the infernal guardian. Cerberus has a pretty storied family history, being the son of Typhoeus and Echidna, both themselves pretty horrifying monstrosities in their own right. He's the brother of Orthus, who was a giant 2-headed dog who probably would have been a lot more famous were it not for his 3-headed brother. Interestingly, there's actually also some historical discrepancy about Cerberus and his many heads. While almost all depictions ubiquitously show Cerberus having 3 heads, the poet Hesiod described Cerberus as a beast with 50 heads or more, which is a little unsettling to consider. Although, honestly, I feel like that many dog heads all in one place, it would start to get cute in its own way. Now, Cerberus gets a bit of a bad rap. He's done damage to the giant 3-headed dog community, but he has been known to be friendly. In the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, Orpheus went to seek his beloved Eurydice from the depths of Hades and was confronted by Cerberus. Orpheus played the beast a beautiful song on his lyre, and in an unprecedented move from Cerberus, Cerberus was so charmed and tamed by the music, he stood aside and let Orpheus in. Can't help but bop his 3 heads along to the rhythm. And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot is the Manticore. A Manticore has the head of a man, the body of a magnificent lion, and a massive tail of a scorpion replete with a poison stinger that stretches behind it. If somehow this isn't enough scary parts on one creature and you want more, some depictions of the Manticore also show it having gigantic bat wings like a bat or a dragon. It uses its tail to sting its prey and leave them helpless, and is even able to fire off its stingers like a projectile, as if an arrow drawn from a bow. The Manticore prefers to hunt by hiding its body in tall grass or the brush of the jungle, so only its head is poking out, appearing as a helpless, frail old man to a passerby that would find it in the woods. From here, it reverts to its true shape and strikes out at the victim, and once the wanderer notices that the old man in front of them has rows and rows of teeth inside its harrowing mouth, well, it's kind of already too late. One of the key traits of a Manticore is that it never leaves behind any evidence. It consumes everything it preys on down to the last drop. It's as if you never existed. The word Manticore is a loose translation of the Persian name for beast, Martikoras, and the legends that date back say the Manticore was the true king of the jungle and was able to dominate any creature and devour any threat that came its way without leaving a trace behind, with one of its favorite targets being men, and preferably in groups. While eating one person would be delightful, it would wait there for groups of 3 to 4 people before it would strike for a proper feast.
Number 5, Nephilim. This one I can get behind for sure. How the pyramids were built still baffles me, and reading all about these things at least makes my brain relax for a second. The giants, the talls, the long neck people, The Nephilim. Again, never been a Bible guy myself, so no judgment if you say all this happened, but I'm just catching up on all this stuff. But in short, the Nephilim were like the offspring of angels and human women, according to Genesis 6:1-4 and Jude. The Nephilim are also mentioned in Numbers 13:33, but it is likely that by this time in Israel's history, Nephilim was used as a term for a tall, intimidating peoples. It's plausible that the Nephilim were both half angels and half giants, making them absolutely huge and absolutely super strong. The Nephilim were the children of the sons of gods and daughters of men, and Christian scholars have theorized that the sons of gods were actually these demonic fallen angels who reproduced with women. Being the offspring of partial angelic heredity, the Nephilim were considered mighty men who are of old the men of renown. The ancients. These people were huge, claiming that they were like 5 times the size of an average man. In the Hebrew Bible, a group of mysterious beings or people of unusually large size and length who lived both before and after the flood were called Nephilimus, sometimes translated to giants. Even the fallen ones, from the Hebrew nephil, meaning to fall. Seems like these people were writing about similar stuff, huh? Spooky. Number 4, 200 million horsemen. This next one is not really a creature as much as it's the end of a lot of all of us. All this Armageddon stuff they were saying, that's some pretty strange stuff that's on its way. Book of Revelation stuff, you know? Quote, I saw as God wanted to show me the horses and the men on them. The men had pieces of iron on their chests. These were red like fire and blue like the sky and yellow like sulfur. The heads of the horses looked like the heads of lions. Fire and smoke and sulfur came out of their mouths. 1/3 part of all man was killed by the fire and smoke and sulfur that came out of their mouths. Word for word. Horsemen or ancient biblical technology? This sounds horrifying. Also, 200 million? That's a lot of flying flaming horses just trucking around the skies and sands like giant tanks, firing fire out of their mouths and nose. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were gleaming metal. And from the midst of all this came likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness. Okay. You put a Baja hoodie on me at a Dave Matthews concert and hear me saying all that stuff, you probably just think I'm some sci-fi stoner. Nope. This is riveting material, folks. I need to read this thing front to back. Apparently this force was supposed to have taken out, or is going to take out, 1/3 of the entire world's population. I know like 3 things that can do that. Pandemics, missiles, and floods. However, if men and horses showed up with lion heads breathing fire, it's safe to say it's game over. Number 3, the Leviathan. Okay, at first I was like, oh, that's a roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland. No, this vicious monster was actually modeled after this vicious monster. The Leviathan, the second of the great monsters described in the book of Job. This Leviathan is an absolute massive sea monster who's impervious to human weapons, breathes fire, and emits smoke from his nostrils. So this is a Zelda boss for sure. The Leviathan is probably related to another ancient monster called Loten, a 7-headed giant serpent who represents primeval chaos, as with pretty much every other biblical creature does. Hey, these things aren't meant to be cute and fuzzy. There's some less exciting theories that insist the Leviathan is just a dramatic interpretation of a crocodile or anaconda or maybe a plesiosaur, resembling something like the Loch Ness Monster. But that doesn't explain the breathing fire thing, or the size. Was this giant sea snake a water dragon? Because apparently it's like 300 miles long. Yeah, terrifying. Scary thing now is many different religions and cultures have their own version of the Leviathan. Tiamat, Hydra, Jormungandr. Maybe this thing was just hunted into extinction. I don't know. What do you think? Number 2, Archangel Michael. It is said that the angels are not humans, but creatures made from God's creation. I've also seen what the Bible describes angels looking like, and it's not handsome people with wings. Apparently a lot of these things, people really couldn't even describe what they were seeing in front of them. But we'll get to what these things look like in a minute. Of those creatures, Satan, aka Lucifer, is one. The one. However, here is even one creature that Satan fears more than any creature, and that's fellow Archangel Michael. Or Saint Michael. Some say they're brothers, some say they were on the same team for a bit. This is some good stuff, people. Quote, now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Revelation 12:7-9. Okay, so hold on. He and them are all down here with us? That's terrifying. Apparently Michael led that army that won, so whatever scares Satan scares the hell out of me as well. Also, all these pictures and statues of him and like window panes are all of him like wielding a giant sword made of light, just stepping on Satan's back as a hero. That's pretty intimidating, not gonna lie. And coming in at the number 1 spot, Ophanim. Okay, so what angels actually looked like apparently was like giant geometrical feathers with eyes and a consciousness. Some had horns, some had hooves, lots of gold and metal colors. This next thing doesn't even make sense to my brain. I feel like this is an anthill trying to understand an iPhone. Quote, as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparked like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel, intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures were faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. Ezekiel 1:15-18. First off, is this thing even a creature? Yeah, everything I see here is an alien. Is this just us trying to process some sort of like energy being with eyes? Because if I saw Lucifer that looks like the hunk on the Netflix show, and then I saw this thing? One of the Dead Sea Scrolls interprets them as angels. Late sections of the Book of Enoch interprets them as class of celestial beings who don't sleep and guard the throne of God. Whatever this thing or things are, it sounds and looks absolutely horrifying. How could you paint that on a ceiling? I would just give up and paint wings and a halo as well. For real though, like that is a spaceship of some sort, isn't it? I mean, I understand the times, maybe the science wasn't there, but this thing is straight out of a sci-fi novel.
Number 5, Pazuzu. Our first terrifying demon up on this list has made quite the career for himself in pop culture. He's picked up some small gigs here and there. He's serving as a sort of mascot of sorts for the real fake band Gorillaz, multiple cameos on Futurama, and won some acclaim for his star-studded role in The Exorcist, possessing Reagan and making us all afraid of pea soup. Although his real historical background is far more interesting than any of his pop culture appearances. Pazuzu has been around for a long time. First being recorded as a Babylonian demon wind god, who was always playing both sides so he'd come out on top. He was a god of wind, and it was thought that the wind ravaging, storms, and locusts were all byproducts of Pazuzu's rage. But he was also thought to be a protector. He would protect the home, taking a particular liking to watching over pregnant women. He was an incredibly destructive force in nature, and when it would come time to throw down, Pazuzu would fly across the world, breaking the wings of other demons to prevent them from getting into any trouble. Sort of like a demonic Batman. His portrayal in The Exorcist is probably where most people know him from and assume those things about him, where he's seen as a much more plain Jane possessing demon, lacking his impressive wings and other traits, and not doing a whole lot of flying around or anything with the wind, focusing a lot more on projectile vomiting and harassing a couple of priests. The real Pazuzu is a lot cooler than his Exorcist appearance, but no doubt more people know about that than they do an ancient Babylonian wind god. I don't think I'd like to spend much time with either incarnation face to face, and those priests definitely didn't want to either. Now ghouls, goblins, lend me your ears, and subscribe if you wouldn't mind. Number 4. Belphegor. Now another demon who's had his moment in pop culture. Maybe you recognize Belphegor from Supernatural's first fledgling season, all the way back when the boys were wide-eyed and hadn't even died once yet. Or maybe if you're a Persona fan, you recognize Belphegor as the perpetually bored demon on the can. It's a video game with a talking cat. And you play as a guy who's got a healthy sleep schedule and can manage his social circle well. It's not a game focused on realism. But it turns out, doing a little research, there was a reason for this foul demon's appearance. One of the 7 princes of hell, the demonic icon of sloth's favorite offering isn't blood or a fresh goat, but a little mud pie, feces if you want to get scientific with it. Look, I'm not going to judge, and I'm not going to ask what he's doing with it. Old lore just says that if you wanted to summon Belphegor, you had to bring him a lot of feces. There's no metric volume ever listed, just a lot. If you do summon him, he'll trade you wondrous riches, expand your ability to discover new things, expand your consciousness, but at the cost of the temptation of your mortal soul, and you'll also probably never be able to wash your hands clean again. I'm sorry, I don't usually work so blue. It's the lazy man's comedy, although perchance that's fitting for the demon prince of sloth. Belphegor has been depicted in all manner of ways over the years, appearing sometimes as esoteric things like tree branches, or sometimes taking the form of beautiful women. But one wood carving in the 18th century of him sitting on an 18th century John sealed his fate pretty much forever, and then since then, he's almost always been depicted as a horned demon sitting on a throne of sorts. Belphegor, I want to make something clear here. I'm not making fun of you. I'm trying to make sense of all this. Number 3, the Legion. Now, this next demon is a tiny bit of a cheat because although it's supposed to be a top 5 list, I'm about to make it a top 500,000 list. This next demon is known as the Legion, for it is many. The Legion's first documented recording is from the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus Christ encountered a man possessed by a demon. When he spoke to the man in an effort to exorcise him, he asked for the name of the demon inside him, and the man responded, Legion, for there were many devils inside him. Upon being exorcised from the man, the Legion asked if it could instead be transferred to a herd of pigs, which he then obliged. Now the Legion is pretty atypical when it comes to demons. It's not the prince of anything, it's not the manifestation of any one sin, and it's not any one thing at all. The Legion is made of countless demons that all function together in unison like a hive mind. When one has a thought, the rest of the Legion obeys. When one member of the Legion speaks, the rest of them speak all at once. Now sometimes the armies of Satan are referred to as the legions of hell, but I guess the Legion is a separate thing altogether. It must make filling out forms very difficult. No one's really sure what sort of demons the Legion are or what they look like even. It's just agreed that there's a lot of them all working together on their common goals. Like I said, no one really knows what they look like, but if you've ever seen a horde of, anything all in one place, you can't imagine that it would be anything pleasant. Now the Legion isn't as much of a pop culture starlet as some of the other demons I've mentioned on this list, but that doesn't mean that it's influenced things in pop culture. The phrase Legion for we are many appears in all sorts of different things, probably because it's just a very cool way to describe yourself. A recurring boss fight in the Castlevania video games called Legion appears as a writhing mass of bodies, no doubt inspired by the story. And the character in Mass Effect named Legion is an AI life form comprised of thousands of individual AI working in tandem, who directly references the story, introducing itself, saying we are Legion for we are many. And while I'm on it, Legion was the entire best character in Mass Effect, but that's neither here nor there. Sleep easy, big guy. Number 2, Beelzebub. Now we're getting into the big hitters. Beelzebub is thought to be one of the first angels to have ever fallen to hell, alongside Leviathan and Lucifer himself. He and Lucifer actually have a bit of an identity crisis, as the two are sometimes thought to be interchangeable. They must have similar haircuts. Some demonologists argue that Beelzebub is another name for Lucifer, and some others pose that he's one of his most trusted lieutenants. But whatever Beelzebub is, everyone can agree that he's pretty horrifying. His history is fairly interesting. It's thought that his namesake is a mockery of the god Baal, an ancient Bronze Age god of fertility. Some scholars believe that Beelzebub's name comes from Baal-zebub, translating to Lord of the Flies, inferring that the followers of Baal are nothing more than flies worshipping a dung god. They didn't get the memo that Belphegor was the dung god. The Lord of the Flies sort of ended up becoming Beelzebub's title, with almost all depictions of the demon featuring flies in ubiquitous amounts around him. Occasionally he's even depicted as a giant fly. It's very Kafkaesque. Beelzebub is said to be one of the most powerful demons inside of Hell's domain, capable of great control over humanity, able to tempt them. Beelzebub was cited during the Salem witch trials as the entity that had corrupted and swayed so many women to witchery. Now there's some discrepancy as to what sin Beelzebub is thought to preside over, with some offerings saying that he represents pride, some others saying that he represents gluttony, which I would say probably seems a little more fitting for a fly demon anyway, and he's most commonly associated with gluttony. Number 1, Asmodeus. Yeah, it probably would have made a lot of sense to have Lucifer as the number 1 spot on this list. I mean, he's the king of hell and all that. So let's just take this moment, give him an honorable mention, and say he's at the number 0 spot, just because I thought it was a little obvious, and I'm pretty sure you know who Satan is, and there's other demons we could talk about, bring up some unknown ones. So filling in at the number 1 spot is Asmodeus, one of the princes of hell and the embodiment of the cardinal sin of lust. Asmodeus fell from heaven alongside the other fallen angels, reforming as a prince of hell. Asmodeus is said to have been married to Lilith, the primordial she-demon, famed for her banishing from the Garden of Eden and famed for destroying Fraser Crane. Lilith was cursed and banished for her defilement and depicted as a temptress, and Asmodeus saw all that and was like, hey girl, I'm into all that stuff. You want to procreate an endless stream of demons into the world and reign over a dominion of chaos? And the rest is wedded bliss. Depictions of Asmodeus vary pretty wildly from case to case. Occasionally he's drawn as a handsome young fella, but most commonly he's depicted as a squat, vaguely humanoid creature with a rooster leg, the tail of a snake, 3 heads, comprising of a bull, a goat, and a scruffy demon head as the center. Asmodeus presides over lust with the help of his beloved Lilith, and the two tempt humans with madness and desire to ruin people with lechery. Somehow this wasn't enough for Asmodeus though, as some stories also describe Asmodeus as having command over the betting halls of hell and is responsible for tempting man's souls towards gambling. So what I am hearing from this is that Asmodeus probably parties harder than any demon out there.
Number 5 on this list is the Helila Monster. This is a real-life creature that's literally named Monster. Like, what? The San Diego Zoo says, as the name might suggest, the Helila Monster has one of the worst reputations in the reptile world. This lizard is often feared and has been described as frightful and repulsive, especially in local folklore. It's been accused of many things, such as spitting venom, leaping several feet in the air to attack, stinging with its tongue, and killing people with gusts of poisonous breath. We're glad you're reading this to learn the truth about these interesting lizards. Helila monsters are heavy-bodied lizards covered with bead-like scales called osteoderms that are black and yellow or pink, covering all but their belly. The Helila monster is venomous. Its venom is made up by a row of glands in the lizard's lower jaw. When the lizard bites, small grooves in the teeth help the venom flow into its prey. The bite of a Helila monster is very strong, and the lizard may not loosen its grip for several seconds. It may even chew so that the venom goes deeper into the wound. So what are the positives here? Well, there aren't really that many, but what's kind of the light at the end of the tunnel? Well, this poison usually doesn't kill humans, keyword being usually there. It will, however, be extremely painful and could paralyze you. Then, if you're paralyzed and you're out in the middle of the desert, well, death could come from a number of different ways at that point. Running into one of these things would definitely not be in your best interest. Number 4 on this list is the Indian saw-scaled viper. Our first snake on this list, guys. You guys knew that there had to be a few of them popping up here. This is something that you really don't want to pop up in the desert, though. CN Traveler says, while plenty of snake species pack enough venom to bring down a human, not all of them take the multifaceted approach of the Indian saw-scaled viper. Sometimes called the little Indian viper or the saw-scaled viper, these reptiles live in some of the most populated areas of the region they occupy, which stretches well beyond India. They remain inconspicuous, though, by using their natural camouflage to blend into desert surroundings. Because they are typically active at night, it's best to listen for their defensive sizzling sound. This comes from a behavior called stridulation, in which the snake forms coils and rubs its scales together. Even with a warning, saw-scaled vipers are extremely aggressive, with more than double a lethal dose in each bite. Now, luckily for us, there is an anti-venom for this snake, but if you don't get it fast enough, then it's lights out. What's really not great about these little guys is how aggressive they are. Like, you could just be walking through the desert, minding your own business, and then, boom, out from behind a rock, this scaled viper leaps out, and that's it, you're toast. Snakes are scary, guys, especially the ones that are super aggressive. Number 3 on this list is the Arizona bark scorpion. Ever since I was a kid, scorpions have just been a big no for me. Like, they don't really look like something that should be in this world, really. Wikipedia says, the Arizona bark scorpion is a small light brown scorpion common to the Sonoran Desert in the southwestern United States and northwestern Mexico. An adult male can reach 8 centimeters in length, while a female is slightly smaller with a maximum length of 7 centimeters. The Arizona bark scorpion is the most venomous scorpion in North America, and its venom can cause severe pain, coupled with numbness, tingling, and vomiting in adult humans, typically lasts between 24 and 72 hours. Temporary dysfunction in the area stung is common, like a hand or possibly an arm can be immobilized or experience convulsions. It also may cause loss of breath for a short time. Due to the extreme pain induced, many victims describe sensations of electrical jolts after envenomation. Guys, could you imagine being stuck like that for 72 hours? That would be the most excruciating 72 hours of your life. Think about how badly you'd want to just fast forward life and get through that. And that's if you manage to survive the whole experience, which some people aren't even capable of doing. Number 2 on this list is the inland taipan. This thing is a born-bred killer and not what you want to come across in the desert. Wikipedia says, the inland taipan, also commonly known as the western taipan, the small-scaled snake or the fierce snake, the species is endemic to semi-arid regions of Central East Australia. Aboriginal Australians living in those regions named the snake Dendrobilia. It was first described by Frederick McCoy in 1879 and then by William John Maclay in 1882, but for the next 90 years it was a mystery to the scientific community. No further specimens were found and virtually nothing was added to the knowledge of this species until its rediscovery in 1972. Based on the median lethal dose value in mice, the venom of the inland taipan is by far the most toxic of any snake, much more so than even that of sea snakes, and it has the most toxic venom of any reptile when tested on human heart cell culture. The inland taipan is a specialist hunter of mammals, so its venom is specially adapted to kill warm-blooded species. It is estimated that one bite possesses enough lethality to kill at least 100 fully grown humans. It is an extremely fast and agile snake that can strike instantly with extreme accuracy, often striking multiple times in the same attack, and it will poison in almost every case. One bite kills over 100 adult humans. Are you actually kidding me? Think about how insane that is. Like, literally a milliliter of this stuff gets into your blood and that's it, game over. Body enters complete shutdown mode. It's also crazy fast and agile, so trying to fight this thing without getting bitten probably isn't an option. You need to fight it perfectly to escape unscathed. This thing doesn't even seem like something from this planet. Like, I get some serious boss fight vibes from this snake. Luckily, there isn't too many of them around, and you would need to go deep into some deserts to find them. Maybe don't do that though, because the outcome of finding one might not be the best. And finally, number 1 on this list is the 6-eyed sand spider. So already this thing has a leg up on the competition because it has 6 eyes, and that's pretty freaking scary. Animal Corner says, the 6-eyed sand spider is a medium-sized spider found in deserts and other sandy places in southern Africa. It is a member of the Sicaridae family, and close relatives of this spider are sometimes found in both Africa and in South America. Its nearest relatives are the recluse spiders, which are found worldwide. The 6-eyed sand spider is also known as the 6-eyed crab spider due to its flattened stance and ladder-grade legs. The venom of this spider's bite is said to be one of the most dangerous on record. Over 38,000 species of 6-eyed sand spiders have been identified. However, because of their great ability for hiding, it's believed that about 200,000 species exist. So there are tons of these things, and they also have the deadliest venom. Great, just absolutely fantastic. I love that for us. Don't know if you guys can tell, but there's some serious sarcasm going on in my voice right now. Spiders are personally my least favorite animal on the planet, and considering this particular one has 6 eyeballs and is super deadly, it's gonna be number 1 on my list.